Welcome to the G5 Hive and our next installment of our Worker Bee series, where we deep dive into the G5 college football landscape with the folks that know the teams the best. For watching us on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. And if you're listening to us in podcast form, please rate and review. Today, we'll be heading over to the Mountain West Conference and taking a look at the San Diego State Aztecs, who finished 3-9 in 2024. They've wrapped up their 2025 spring practice with their Aztec Fest showcase on April 19th. We have some special guests joining us today. He is the co-host of the Big Rich, TD, and Fletch morning show on 101 KGB San Diego and the Fletch Zone on San Diego Sports 760. He is Ben Fletcher. Our other guest is an analyst at San Diego Sports 760. He is a class of 2012 Hall of Famer for the Aztecs football. He was the 169th pick in the 2003 NFL draft by the Miami Dolphins. He is J.R. Tolver. Ben can be found on X at Fletch Sports. JR can be found on X at JR Tolver 16. Welcome to the show, guys.
What an intro, man. Thank you for having us.
Jeez. Hey, run that back. Let's do it again.
Well, for those just tuning into the G5 Hive for the first time, can you tell us a little bit about yourselves and how long you've been covering and a part of San Diego State football? Ben, we'll start with you first.
Yeah, I'm from California, born and raised, and then I've been in San Diego the last 10 years, been covering Aztecs football, Aztecs basketball for the last 8 years, been on the broadcast with JR for the last 3 years. Started running the board for San Diego State games on the radio and then kind of worked my way into doing pregame, halftime, postgame stuff. Love college football. JR played it.
Yeah, Ben is my work wife, so to speak. Yeah, we've had a lot of great times together, really just kind of hanging out and seeing the program grow and evolve. You know, I moved to San Diego in 1992 when I was 12 years old, but I'm from Louisiana. I'm from Shreveport. So, you know, I was sitting in my living room as a 12-year-old watching Marshall Faulk, the pride of Louisiana, tear it up for the San Diego State Aztecs. So when I moved to San Diego, you know, I had already had that in my head. So when it came time to pick a university, I picked San Diego State, class of 1998. Had a phenomenal 5 years at San Diego State University. Loved it so much that I decided I'll never let them get rid of me. And that's been in the form of hanging out with Ben and doing the pregame and some postgame broadcasts as well. So thank you guys for having us. Really excited to be here.
Well, thank you guys for joining us and agreeing to kind of cover the Aztecs for us. Let's move over to some Aztec football talk, and we'll kind of start with the offense. For those not familiar with the Aztecs offensive style, how would you describe it?
I'd say from like the 60s to the 70s, it was all Air Coryell. I mean, it was the offense that Don Coryell put into place that put him on the map that then translated to the NFL. And then obviously JR's years, it was a lot of offense too. He has games with like 400 receiving yards or something like that. But then it got into the Brady Hoke era 1, where it turned into a ground and pound team, defense first, toughness wins. And when Rocky Long took it over after that, it was a lot more of the same. Now that we're into the Sean Lewis era, I think you're looking more at a really spread out offense that they don't abandon the run whatsoever. They use the run to keep on time, but it's very up tempo. It's spread out. A lot of emphasis on the quarterback making good throws at the right time. And if they can clean up the penalties, which really halted the offense last year, I think we're going to see something special this year.
Yeah, you always get an influx of, you know, really great talent here in Southern California. These coaches have also done a really good job of going to Texas, finding some of the best in that Dallas area and that Houston area. So from a skill position standpoint, you know, you always have some guys, some dudes that can run, and some guys that can go get it. So I would say this offense is really going to be built on athleticism. We saw some glimpses of it last year, not nearly enough, you know, not as much as Aztecs fans want to see. But I think when you have dynamic playmakers and athletic players, by default, you end up putting big plays on the board. And I think that's what San Diego State wants to do. I think they want to go fast, but I think ultimately they want to create big plays, exciting plays, and hopefully that's what we see from the Aztecs in 2025.
Well, let's get to the position where it all starts on offense, and that's quarterback. Last year's starter Danny O'Neal is off to Wisconsin. Javance Tupuada Johnson is heading to North Dakota, and A.J. Duffy's now off to New Haven. The Aztecs must like something there in Michigan. I don't know what it is, but the staff brought in Jaden Dangle from Michigan and Burt Emanuel Jr. from Central Michigan. Ben, how did the quarterback room look in the spring?
I think it looked good. I want to start by saying I'm bummed that we didn't get to see the future of Danny O'Neal from last year, because I think he's a tough kid, man. He gutted out some games last year, and you could see it starting to click, but it never really felt like he found his rhythm. I think if we would have seen another year with him, the intangibles were all there. But the guys they brought in, you mentioned two of them, Jaden Denegal out of Michigan. He's got that body. Like, you look at the 6'5", 235-pound quarterback, that is Josh Allen in the NFL. And from everything I've heard from spring ball, from everything we've seen so far, the kid's got an accurate cannon. He can throw the ball a mile, and it seems like they're really excited about what they've seen from him. And then Burt Emanuel Jr., the Aztecs saw him last year at Central Michigan, and he got in for at least a few series, if I'm remembering right. And he's just athletic as all get out. I mean, the kid can run like crazy. Total dual threat quarterback. I could see both of them getting snaps early this year. It seems like Jaden has the start as of right now, but we'll see. Burt could make that influence in a big way. Kyle Crum is the one returner that they had from a year ago, and they love Kyle in the locker room. Say he's a great leader. It seems like he's still got some work to do. JR, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but it feels like it's down to Jaden and Burt, and there's a good chance we see both of them on the field.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And what's crazy is Jaden Denegal, who was at the University of Michigan last year, my rookie roommate is a guy named Ronald Bellamy. Ron Bellamy is the wideout coach at Michigan. So, he's one of the first guys that I called. He's one of the first guys when I called when I learned that, Denegal was coming to San Diego. And I just asked him, hey, man, what type of kid is he? What type of player is he? And he said, man, this kid he's dynamic. He's a big body, crazy athletic, has a huge arm. It's been a while since San Diego State has had a quarterback that looks the part. We had Kevin O'Connell get drafted by the New England Patriots. If you stand next to Kevin O'Connell, be prepared to look like a toddler. He's 6'7", right? Denegal kind of has that same presence to him. He's going to really look the part. He has a big arm. And Ron said, man, he can sling it. He's a great locker room guy. He said one of the things that, he struggled with maybe is a little bit is his accuracy. So I think it's a really interesting that they brought Denegal and Emanuel back here at the same time. Obviously, he comes from NFL pedigree. His father played in the National Football League as well. And he's just a very good-spirited kid from Houston, Texas. Again, another locker room guy, another glue guy that does a good job bringing the guys around him. But he's more athletic, right? You put the ball in his hands. He killed us a couple of times last year on some athletic plays. He's the type of kid that when he comes into the football game, expect something exciting or dynamic to happen. So, I would kind of look at these two guys and say, I think Denegal is going to get the nod as from everything that I've heard in terms of being the starter. But I wouldn't be surprised at all to see both of those guys play a lot of snaps in 2025.
Well, JR, you've got a unique background, so I want to ask you, if this is a true battle and we see multiple quarterbacks being used, at what part of the season do you believe, hey, we need to have a quarterback by this time? How hard is that from a wide receiver standpoint when you're going between two different guys there at quarterback?
I think it depends on how you're looking at the quarterback position. If you're looking at the quarterback position as I have a guy who's going to run 80% of the offense, he's going to be my first down guy, my second down guy. He's going to put the ball in the air. He's going to get me to good down and distant plays. And then I have a guy who comes off the bench and adds a little bit of change, right? I think of Cordell Stewart. I think of those days where, you have your quarterback, but then you get a guy that comes off the bench and gives you a little bit of change of pace or a little bit of a different look. In my mind, if the Aztecs are approaching the situation like that, it'll be fine, right? I think if you are putting those guys up against one another and saying, hey, we're looking for our signal caller and we have to figure out who is going to be our signal caller, obviously the longer you go by having guys kind of go in and out, the harder it is for everyone to adapt. Credit to Coach Lewis last year. I think he had a tough decision to make. He had Danny O'Neal, A.J. Duffy. Javance had shown a lot of great signs at that quarterback position. But when Coach Lewis decided that Danny O'Neal was the starter because they were looking for a signal caller. So it really depends on the game plan and how they see themselves using Burt and Denigal. But again, if they're looking at a signal caller, I think you got to figure that out quick. If you're looking at, hey, we got two quarterbacks, they're both going to give us two separate things, then I think you can actually ride that through the season and create a pretty dynamic game plan around it.
Well, let's move over to the running game, and the running back room will look a bit different here in 2025. The Aztecs bell cow from a season ago and first-team all-conference running back Marquez Cooper has graduated. Cam Davis and Jalen Armstead have hit the portal. Lucky Sutton is the lone returner who took a snap at running back here in 2024. He had 5 rushes for 35 yards. The staff brings in Christian Washington from Coastal Carolina, and Byron Cardwell Jr. is set to join this team for the fall. Cardwell Jr. comes in via California. And if you look at Sean Lewis's track record in terms of running back usage, it's very interesting. So when he was at Kent State, his running back was Marquez Cooper. And dating back to 2018, if his running back was not named Marquez Cooper, like his RB1 got like 500 yards, and that was it. Like it was very much a committee approach. If the guy's name was Marquez Cooper, like he was a workhorse, and he got fed a ton. Marquez Cooper had, I think, 3,000-4,000 yard seasons, under Coach Lewis. Given all that, like, what are your expectations here in 2025? Ben, what do you think we see or how these running backs get deployed?
Man, Marquez Cooper was fun to watch. You're reminding me about that. And we had a lot of fun watching him last year. But I think a question JR and I asked ourselves a lot was, why are we not seeing the other guys? Marquez is a gladiator. He's a warrior. But we know Lucky Sutton's got some juice. JR's been watching him since he was in high school at Cathedral Catholic. And I've been asked a lot so far this offseason, who's going to be that breakout guy for the Aztecs this year? And I think it's Lucky Sutton, man. This kid is a stud. He's a bigger running back for college game. He's great in short yardage situations, has breakout speed. I really, really like Lucky Sutton. And that's not to say anything about the other guys. Byron, who you mentioned, he was great at Oregon. He was good at Cal, but injuries were keeping him off the field a lot. And so coming back home to San Diego, hope if he can stay healthy, that kid's got some serious juice as well. And then we got to watch Christian Washington when he was at New Mexico for the first 2 years of his career. And he's got some juice as well. He was kind of in a backup role at that point. But Christian Washington could bring a lot of fun to this team too. Lucky Sutton's my guy to watch, but that doesn't mean that it's not going to be a more committee-style room this year, which I think is the smartest thing to do in this offense because it is so fast-paced and you are getting off so many snaps. It felt like Marquez Cooper was just the guy who knew the offense the best, and Sean Lewis felt comfortable having him out there in year 1. But in year 2, hopefully these guys have been bringing it in a little bit more, and maybe we see a bit of a committee.
JR, how would you describe like the different skill sets or, kind of what these running backs do best or maybe how they can be best utilized in the offense?
Yeah, I mean, Lucky is an every down back. He's huge. I'm every bit of 6'1", and I kind of have to strain my neck to look up to Lucky. I watched him go for 6 touchdowns in high school, run for 600 yards in a playoff game. He's an absolute stud. And it's been a little bit surprising to the San Diego State community that he hasn't been used more. But I like the fact that he's stuck around. In this age and era of I'm not playing, I'm going to pick my ball up and go somewhere else. I've really admired Lucky for sticking around, for getting his body together, for adjusting to being a college student. And I think just getting ready to be breakout star in the NCAA. I wouldn't be surprised if Lucky's one of those guys that just burst onto the scene as a running back. He's an older guy now. He's more mature. He's set behind people. He's been patient. And again, he's an absolute talent. So I think Lucky's an every down back. He can do a little bit of everything. If you needed to pick up a yard, he will. But if you need him to go 90, he will. There's a young kid by the name of Sincere Rainey, who's a very dynamic football player coming out of high school. I've heard nothing but great things about him, his explosiveness, his work ethic. But I look at Lucky and I look at Washington. Again, I watched that kid score 5 touchdowns in a game against Granite Hills as a senior. And he did it every which way. Interception return for a touchdown, kickoff return, a bunch of long runs. I think that running back room it's stacked. And that feels really, really good coming into a year where the offensive line struggled a little bit last year. A lot of that had to do with injuries. But now you got a healthy offensive line. It might actually be the strength of that entire offensive football team. But the running backs aren't very far behind. And let's be honest, Coach Lewis likes to be balanced. He likes to run the football. And I think he has the horses in that running back room to do so.
Well, let's move over to the wide receivers. This 2025 room will look very different. The Aztecs saw 4 of their top 5 wideouts in terms of receiving yards either graduate or transfer. The room is highlighted by the return of the man in the slot, Jordan Napier. Jordan had 43 receptions for 446 yards and led the team in receiving touchdowns with 4 last season. To supplement these losses, we saw the staff bring in Jacob Bostic from Texas A&M, Kyle's Kit Denton from Northwestern State, and they plan to bring in Nathan Acevedo from Fresno State and Donovan Brown from Monroe University in the fall. Ben, did anyone stand out to you in the spring?
Miles Kit Denton is fast, man. You talk about breakaway speed for a wide receiver. I think all of his catches last year, or at least a vast majority of them, were over 20 yards. And we've been talking a lot about the balance that Sean Lewis likes to run his offense with. And there's a lot of running in that. But when he likes to take shots, and he likes to take them early in a game, especially if it gets into a second and short situation, that's where we saw as the year would go on, Lewis Brown really started to shine. Was second and short situations and then take a shot for him. And he always seemed to come up with it. So if that's the plan going into this year too, I could easily see it being Miles. I can't tell you how many times on the pregame show, JR and I would just ask, can we please find ways to get Jordan Napier the ball in space? It doesn't matter where he touches it, man. He is a threat to break out and go the distance. Against Cal, there was a play last year where he broke 6 tackles on his way to a 40-yard touchdown. Guys were just bouncing off of him. So those 2 guys, to me, I'd be putting a lot of pressure on. And we'll see. With so many new faces, anyone can emerge. JR, I don't know if you've ever had an experience like that where there's that many new faces in a wide receiver room. It's definitely new for the San Diego State that I've been covering over the years.
JR, last season, Lewis Brown, the 4th, led the team in yards with 625. Who do you think takes over for Brown on the outside?
I think it's probably going to be so Jeremiah McClure is a kid who is a San Diego kid, went to UCLA, transferred back to San Diego State last year. And Jeremiah McClure is, I mean, I'm really good friends with one of his high school football coaches, Verlaine Patofe. He says Jeremiah is a freak. He says it all the time. And I think with Jeremiah transferring back to San Diego State, not seeing a lot of playing time last year, whether it was not being able to pick up the playbook or being nicked a little bit. I think, that kid being back home and being comfortable has an opportunity to kind of burst onto the scenes. He's a very, very, very good football player. I know Coach Sampson, the wideout coach, thinks very highly of him, thinks very highly of his work ethic. So I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if you saw a kid like Jeremiah McClure come in on the heels of what Lewis Brown did and maybe even exceed it. That being said, Bostic, I think, is a kid that can absolutely run, can absolutely fly. Miles can absolutely fly. listen, Coach Lewis wants to push the ball up the field. Again, we talk a lot about Aztec fast and getting as many plays as humanly possible, but they really want chunk plays, and they're very selective about who they pull into that wideout room. I had a bunch of catches my day at San Diego State, but I don't know if I would have fit their profile because, I wasn't a 4-3, 4-4 guy. I think they're really trying to get as many guys that can run, that it can absolutely tear up the field so that they can go downfield. And I think that's how Coach Lewis creates such balance in the passing game and in the running game. So, but I would say if I had to guess, because he's been in the program, I think Jeremiah McClure and Jordan Napier will end up being the top two receivers for San Diego State this year.
All right, let's move over to the tight ends. And if you were to describe how the tight ends were utilized in this offense to someone that's never caught a game, how would you describe it, Ben?
It's a lot like a lot of the offense. You got to be versatile. You got to be able to line up in a lot of different positions. It's not just a tight end who's sitting on the edge. Sometimes Lewis will have him at fullback. You got to be able to chip people, especially if it's a shot play. You got to be able to make sure that the defensive edge is at least a little bit slower getting to the quarterback. He asked a lot out of the tight ends. I think as the year progressed last year, especially Harrison, he became more of a wide receiver. And I think that started at his time in Colorado with Coach Lewis building that trust. But it became essential for Danny O'Neal, a young quarterback, to have that big target. They got a ton of new tight ends coming in. A lot of them are freshmen. I don't know who's going to be that guy yet. I was talking to San Diego State a little bit earlier today, and the name Seth Adams kept coming up as a guy who they really like in that room. But again, it's a young room. They're going to be asked to do a lot, especially in the blocking game early in the season. And then later on in the season, you're going to see if one of them can emerge as a pass catcher, because they're going to need him doing that too. And fake punts. Fake punts are huge for the tight end. I can't tell you how many catches tight ends got on fake punts last year.
JR, as Ben mentioned, this room graduates Michael Harrison, Jude Wolf, and the room's really young. 6 redshirt freshmen or freshmen combined. Was there anyone that kind of stood out in that tight end room for you during the spring, or think it's a work in progress in fall camp?
Yeah, I think it's Jude leaving. So we had 2 years in a row where we had a guy, right? So we had Mark Redmond, who came in from Washington State, played 1 year, and then took off and went to Louisville. He's in NFL camp right now. Again, a really good football player. And then Jude Wolf, when you see him, transfer down from USC, the body of a Greek god, 6'5", 250 pounds, just athletic as they come, and had a really hot start to the season. And I think what ended up happening over the course of the year was the tight ends kind of got lost in the shuffle a little bit as San Diego State was trying to kind of figure out their identity. Again, you talked about Marquez Cooper. We established Marquez Cooper as a threat very, very early on. It just didn't feel like offensively there were those other consistent threats. And I think the tight end kind of fell into that bucket. So I wouldn't actually be surprised this year if we see a lot of those young guys take a little bit of a blocking role in this offense. Again, when you got great running backs like San Diego State does, and you got a solid offensive line, sometimes the tight end just has to blend in to where it's needed. They're part offensive lineman, part running back, part wide receiver. I think what we will see out of the tight ends a lot this year is we'll see them a lot in the run game. So yeah, Seth, the kid who transferred in, they talk a lot about him, how aggressive he is, how physical he is. I think he's going to be a huge cornerstone in that Aztec run game. And if somebody, steps up and becomes a pass catcher, I think we'll all be pleasantly surprised. But the way I see the offense right now, I think it's really going to be built around that receiver room, around that running back room.
Well, the offensive line will look to replace right tackle Nate Williams and center Braden Bryant in 2025. Having 3 starters return is a pretty nice start, but depth could be an issue. The staff brought in some reinforcements on the line. But Ben, what are your expectations for this room heading into 2025?
Stay healthy and less penalties. It was a rotating door last year, man. It was rough from game one. They'll lose their left tackle. So I'm just looking for these guys to hopefully stay healthy, and that would be a great start. And then when you look at what hurt the Aztecs more than anything last year, it was penalties. They were one of the most penalized teams in the country, and a lot of those penalties stemmed from the offensive line. Now, the offense that Sean Lewis wants to run, this Aztec fast offense, it's complicated, man, and it's fast, and you got to be up to speed. Well, sometimes that's going to lead to a lot of offsides. And I think the Aztecs dealt with that early and often last year between offsides and holdings. It felt like every time they got a good drive going, something would stop it. Red zone penalties killed this team a year ago in games where the defense was trying to keep them in. So if they can clean that up, I hope there's a huge emphasis this year on making sure there is as few penalty yardages as possible, and look to the veterans. Christian Jones is the leader of this offense in a lot of ways. I was at the Aztec Fast Showcase. He's that guy that's making everybody laugh. He's the guy who's making sure dodgeball is as competitive as possible. So I'm looking to him to be a big leader at left tackle this year and try to keep the penalties down, man. I cannot emphasize how much they just killed all the momentum the team would have last year.
Well, JR, let's say this line dominates in 2025. Their success is due in large part to whom?
So we lost Big Joe Borgen last year, the very first game of the season. It may have been the first drive of the season.
It was the first quarter for sure. I don't know about first drive.
Yeah, and Joe was a highly anticipated talent transferring over from Arizona. The coaching staff was very, very, very excited about him. Mike Schmidt was back, with the Aztecs last year. Mike has seen it all. He's coached Zach Thomas, who's playing for the Houston Texans. He's had guys, get drafted, and he's seen the good and the bad. And I think he was very, very excited by Big Joe coming over from Arizona. So losing Big Joe in the first game of the season for the season was a huge deal. Not only his stature and his aggressiveness, but Big Joe is a leader in that locker room and became a leader very quickly. So, I think this team with Big Joe, with Christian Jones, Christian is a 6'9" kid who it's just going to take 3 or 4 games before he's on everybody's board as it pertains to NFL talent. And then you got Ross Masuli. Ross is really the maybe the leader of that entire offense, has done a phenomenal job for San Diego State. I think between those 3 guys, you're looking at a very solid, experienced, talented offensive line. And Ben mentioned it. If those guys can stay healthy and they can keep the glue off their hands, I think that we're going to have a pretty solid output from, and it's going to start with that offensive line.
All right, JR, if you had to pick an offensive player to have a breakout type season in 2025, who you got?
Oh man. As a biased old time wide receiver, I'm gonna go Jordan Napier. I know we kind of talked about him having a good season last year. At 40 catches, 400 yards, 4 touchdowns. I think that is scratching the surface of the type of production that he could have. And remember, last year he was a redshirt freshman. It was kind of his first true year playing. He's the guy, and he knows he's the guy, and everybody in that building knows he's the guy, and there's a certain level of swag and confidence that comes with being the guy. I would not be surprised at all if he doubled his production in each one of those categories. So Lucky Sutton was the first one that came in my head, but I got to be loyal to the wideout room. I'm going to say Jordan Napier is going to have a phenomenal, phenomenal season.
All right, Ben, if you had to pick an offensive player to have a breakout type season in 2025, who you got?
Jordan Napier's the layup. JR knocked it out of the park. I thought he could have had 80 catches last year. I can't tell you how many times again JR and I were sitting there doing pregame and being like, just throw him screen passes. The dude will make it happen after that. Just get him the ball in space. But if I'm going with someone else, it's Lucky Sutton. I think he has all the talent in the world. And JR hit on it earlier, but you don't realize how big Lucky is watching him on TV. But he's got these big shoulders. He's a little bit taller. It almost reminds you, not quite to the extent, but a little bit of Derrick Henry, because it doesn't make sense that something that big can move that fast. And I think if he can really pick up the offense and mentally understand what Sean Lewis wants to do, there's a chance he turns into that Marquez Cooper level production this year. And I'd love to see it because you can't ask for a better guy on a team. Lucky is awesome. Every time we've had a chance to talk to him, he just has that big smile and he's got that big athletic build. I think he's going to be incredible this year and a potential NFL guy down the road. San Diego State's got a great history of running backs making it into the league and doing well.
Well, moving over to the defensive side of the ball, JR, for those not familiar with San Diego State's defensive scheme, how would you describe it?
Again, athletic. Athletic is always the word that I'll use when it comes to San Diego State on both sides of the ball. They run a 3-3-5 for a long time, kind of flipped it up a little bit to a 4-2-5. One of the greatest things that they did this year was, move Trey White down and put his hand in the dirt. And he had one of the best seasons in San Diego State history, the first time really playing that position. Trey is another local kid, that played football here in San Diego and played linebacker, played running back. So, again, I go back to that word athletic. And the team is defensively, they've always been very aggressive to the football. Traditionally, this team causes a bunch of turnovers. They get a bunch of lost plays, sacks in the backfield, tackles for loss. They create a bunch of disruption. Last year, we didn't see as much of that. We also saw a lot of big plays given up by this defense, which is something that we normally don't see from the San Diego State defense. But, again, I think this football team is going to be athletic. They're going to, hustle to the ball. They may be undersized, but they're going to be extremely scrappy, extremely opportunistic. And that's how I would describe San Diego State defense as a football team that's going to be tough. They're going to fly to the football, and they're going to create chaos in the backfield and get a ton of turnovers in the process.
Well, moving over to the position groups on this defense and starting with the guys up front along this defensive line, they look like they set up pretty well here in 2025 as they return several starters and rotational guys. But as JR mentioned, it's highlighted by the return of all-conference defensive end Trey White. In 2024, White led the team in sacks with 13. Ben, with several key pieces coming back here in 2025 for this defensive line, what are the expectations?
It is funny to go through all the offense and realize all the new faces and all the young guys that are there. Because on defense, it feels like we're right back at home. It's nice seeing so many guys come back. I mean, Tano Latuli and Trey White were captains on this team a year ago. They were both San Diego high school athletes, and they're both back. And that's great to see. But for Trey specifically, my expectations for him are to build on what was a fantastic year last year, one of the best defensive linemen in the country. And he can impact the game in so many ways. The quarterback here in the footsteps, it's real when Trey White's the one rushing you because he doesn't hold punches, man. When he hits hard. And he's a fumble-making machine. Clearly, the media and whoever votes on these polls thinks it too, already taken home a Mountain West preseason Defensive Player of the Year. Trey White, look, if he builds on what he did last year, I don't know what we're looking at this year. It might be one of the best college football seasons ever. And when you talk about a guy who I see real potential for at the next level, Trey White would be my first one on the list just because of that athleticism, that side-to-side movement that he has, and the way he is just an absolute ball hawk every time. He's not just sacking the quarterback. He's trying to make you fumble too.
I think, Trey White had an outstanding season. I just think maybe he was overshadowed a little bit in the terms of the G5 because of Mike Green, right? And so maybe fans that, general college football fans don't know who Trey White is, but I agree with you. Like he had an outstanding season, and he's going to be this year's version of Mike Green, in my opinion. But JR, if you had to look at other players on that defensive line, who do you kind of see having a big impact in 2025?
Yeah, I think Brady Anderson has shown flashes. Again, another extremely, extremely athletic kid that's been around San Diego State for Brady Nasser, for quite some time. I look at Brady as a guy who, again, I go back to this idea of kids sticking around and hanging around and working on their body and being patient and getting better. Brady is one of those kids. And again, when you start seeing guys graduate and leave San Diego State, and you start seeing those underclassmen start coming into their own, that's where you start having those breakout seasons. I remember seeing the same thing from Keyshawn Banks and Cam Thomas when they were here. When you create space in that room for the next guy to step up, it tends to happen. So I really like Brady. I like Ryan as well. Ryan Henderson, kid out of Las Vegas, Nevada. He's been around the program now for a few years as well. Probably hasn't made the mark on the program up until this point that I think he would have hoped. But again, you get in the program, you start eating your Wheaties, you start doing your push-ups and really understanding how college football works. You get kids that'll burst on the scene really quick. And I look at those two guys, Brady Nassar and Ryan, and I say those guys could very quickly become household names here in San Diego. A lot of that is going to become because of the attention that Trey will get.
Sure.
But when somebody gets the attention, somebody tends to step up. And I wouldn't be surprised if it was one of those two kids.
Well, this linebacker room's highlighted by the return of Tenu Latuli. However, the room will look to fill some holes that Kyle Moretti and Cody Moon have graduated. Ben, did anyone stand out to you in the spring?
Yeah, it's Owen Chambliss. We had a lot of fun watching him last year, and it seemed like every time he would get some momentum in a season, he would get injured. And so Tano is amazing, man. JR and I do our pregame show from the tailgate, and his family has like an entire block of tents set up, it seems like. And they're always willing to share food. They're the best. But Tano is incredible, and we all know about him. I was bummed we didn't get to see more of Owen last year, because it felt like he would get going really good in the first half of a game and then get some sort of stinger or something and miss the second half and then be out for a couple weeks. So I'm hoping we get a full year out of him, because in a 4-2-5 defense, the linebacking core, I honestly think is the most important, because they're where it's vulnerable, right? And so you need two guys who can go sideline to sideline, and these are two guys who can do it. But it's all going to be dependent on health. I really hope we get a full healthy season out of Owen, because he deserves it, man. He's a hard worker. And it wasn't normal injuries you see last year. It was weird injuries that would pop up. And so if we get a full season out of him, I think we'll talk about him the same as we talk about Tano. Just an absolute stud in the middle of the field.
Well, Jer, is there a name in this room that you believe is poised to kind of make that jump here in 2025?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I couldn't agree more with Ben. I think Owen is, again, another one of those very, very, very athletic young men, probably pushing 6'4", really long, wiry guy, does a great job of getting to the ball and bringing his hips to the ball when he gets there. Has some unfortunate injuries, like Ben said, but yeah, I would expect to see Owen kind of burst on the scene this year and make a bunch of plays and really just kind of do what we all expected him to do last year when he transferred in. Immediately when he transferred in, he was kind of a guy that everybody was looking at to come in and be a difference maker. And he just kept getting bit by the injury bug. So hopefully this year he stays healthy and has the season that we all know that he can have.
Ben, you talked about how the linebacker room has that vulnerability there in the middle. Can you explain the importance of Tano to this team and to this linebacking core?
Tano's everything, man. Go back to that Aztec Fast Showcase. It wasn't a traditional spring game by any measure of the word. They had games set up. They had quarterback competitions for everyone to play in. They had dodgeball set up. They had tire flips. They had everything going. And Tano was the guy who was making sure everyone was taking it seriously because there were stakes on the line. And so Tano was the one who was rallying everybody and making sure they understood that he wanted to eat steak that night. And guess what? He did. They won. Tano is that dude, man. And when the defense is turning around and looking for direction, it's very clear that he's the quarterback. And you could tell from every interaction you have with him, he was raised by a great family, and that family's there supporting him. They got custom tents out in the parking lot with his name all over them. And B, that he is just a natural leader. You talk about the $1 million smile, he's got it. You talk about the cool sunglasses, he's got them. And then when he gets out on the field and he hits one time, everyone in the stadium hears it. It's cool to see his growth last year, and I can't wait to see what he does this year.
Well, moving over to this defensive secondary, they look to be a strength of this team in 2025. Aztec fans will see several familiar faces as the cornerback duo of Chris Johnson and Bryce Fields returns, as well as safeties Eric Butler and Deshaun Staley. I feel really good about the cornerbacks and their depth, but I'm kind of curious about the safety group as we saw J.D. Coffey III and William Nemo Jr. graduate. JR, what are your expectations for the secondary heading into 2025?
Yeah, listen, I think Delashon is, had a lot of plays last year for San Diego State. Took a lot of snaps, showed up in a lot of places on film. Eric Butler, is a kid that I think is a little bit overlooked. He's one of those kids that, again, is athletic as they come, right? Like if you put a clock on Eric Butler, he could probably run a 4.44 jumping out of bed, right? So, that's the type of guy that when he's back there playing quarterback of the defense, all he needs is a couple of inklings and a couple of opportunities to really change the game. So I like the experience that we have at that safety position between Staley and Butler. Again, those guys are very familiar with the program. They're older guys. They know what's expected out of them. And when you have a lot of transfers that kind of come in and out, you need a couple of core guys that can set the room. I really look at those as two guys, along with obviously Bryce and Chris, who are playing the corner. We're fortunate. We're really fortunate on the defensive side of the ball that our core guys really stuck around. So as these new guys were coming in and filling in, I think that there was a solid foundation of players there. And the safety room is one of those rooms that's, I think, created a solid foundation with Staley and with Butler.
Ben, was there anyone in the secondary that kind of stood out for you in the spring?
Yeah, I love Deshaun McEwen, man. He got a bad concussion last year that I think sidetracked his season a little bit. But I don't think it's ever an accident in football when you're in the right place at the right time. And it seems like Deshaun McEwen is always in the right place at the right time. If I had to predict who's going to take home a couple pick sixes this year, it'd be Deshaun because he's got breakaway speed. He can high point balls like a wide receiver. It's cool to watch. And that's actually what the play he got concussed on last year. He was about to take down the interception of the year. And JR and I were at that game in UNLV, and it's tough to see. But once Deshaun McEwen, if he comes into this season healthy and can do what I think he can do, it's going to be a really, really good year for the secondary. Chris Johnson probably had the best season last year, and I'm curious to see what he does coming back again this year. But you said it. This is the strength of the team. And when you look at a 4-2-5 defense and how aggressive Sean Lewis wants to be, you want interceptions out of your secondary. And I think they got the guys to do it this year, especially with Chris. Eric Butler, JR said it, but crazy athletic. And we got to meet his dad last year, and you see where he gets his attitude from. But I'm excited to see what these guys do this year because I think Deshaun McEwen's going to have one of those breakout seasons on the defensive side. And I think year 3, right, JR, with the Aztecs?
Yeah.
Deshaun could be special this year, man.
JR, is there a name in this secondary that Aztec fans are familiar with, but you think should get more national attention here in 2025?
Yeah, I think Chris Johnson is going to be a absolute standout corner this year. Another young man that's very, very, very athletic, has a fire to him too. One of the nicest young men you'll meet off the field, but if you watch him when he plays on the field, he has this aggressive energy to him that you very rarely see from that cornerback position. Again, a very looks the part, 6'1", 190 pounds, will come up and hit you, can cover you all over the football field. I think Chris and Eric both have legitimate opportunities to play in the National Football League. And I think both of them coming back to San Diego State and finishing what they started is going to bode well for that opportunity.
Well, Ben, if you had to pick a defensive player to have a breakout type season in 2025, who you got?
Give me Deshaun McEwen, man. Multiple pick sixes this year. Right place, right time. Really, really smart player. And look, again, it's all about staying healthy. But if he could stay healthy this year, I think that he just always happens to stumble into something good. So fumbles, pick sixes, Deshaun McEwen's my guy.
JR, if you had to pick a defensive player to have a breakout type season in 2025, who you got?
I think it's going to be Tano. I am amazed by how good Tano is. I really am. And we used to say when I was playing, watch a guy play basketball and you'll be able to tell how athletic he is. There's a lot of football players out there that just want to like bump into people and on the basketball court. But Tano's like a scratch golfer, right? Like you start looking at some of the athletic traits that Tano has, not only cerebral, but the ability to finesse a golf ball while also being consistently voted as the hardest hitter on that football team. Coming to San Diego State last year, transferring from Army, as much as I think Tano was happy to be home, it was his first year back, first year in a new program, and he played his butt off. I think he's just gonna blow by the numbers that he put up last year. He's a exciting, special football player, and I think it's going to show up big time in 2025.
Well, we've talked offense, we've talked defense. Let's move over to the special teams. And it seems in recent years, San Diego State has become some sort of punter factory, if you will. JR and Ben, how are those special teams units looking, and are there any concerns?
I think they're pretty good, man. Gabe Placencia, preseason Mountain West Special Teams Player of the Year or Kicker of the Year. I'm not sure which one, but he's a stud, and he was good for the Aztecs last year. I think they're kind of working on lengthening out his leg a little bit for this year and seeing if they could use him a little bit more. Sean Lewis likes to go for it, and he likes to fake field goals, likes to fake punts. So it's a little tricky being on special teams in this program. But I think Gabe is going to have a really nice year this year once again. And then you mentioned it with the punters, man. Jack Browning is playing in the NFL right now. I actually know Jack's mom a little bit. She works with my wife in school. And then Matt Ariza, what could be the dude's the punt god. That is one of the coolest things in my life was seeing him punt a football live, which that's not exactly what you want to hang your hat on as a college. But Matt Ariza kicking the football is one of the coolest things ever. And I think they're going to be great once again this year. Pastula is a fantastic punter as well. So they've sort of built that culture, and we'll see how many he can knock down near the 5-yard line.
Yeah, they call Gabe the hefty lefty. So really, really cool to see him. He had some offers as well to leave San Diego State and take his talents to the transfer portal, and decided to stick around and finish what he started. And the coaching staff really, really likes him. The team is a big Gabe fan. So I think Gabe and Tyler makes us, special teams is one of those things where, if you don't pay attention to it, or if you don't got the guys, like it might not win you some games, but you could lose some games from it. I think we have the type of core between Tyler and Gabe where we can actually steal a couple of wins based off their talent and their play. So yeah, we feel really, really good about the kicking game.
And Lewis uses punting as an opportunity. 4 or 5 different times, especially towards the end of last year, they were able to convert on special teams fakes. And I think you got to have a lot of trust in your punter to do something like that. And Lewis obviously does. And he's got trust in the tight end room, who always seems to be in on those special teams fakes. So he's not going to back down from that. Sean Lewis conviction is a huge part for him. And if he thinks it's something that's going to work and help the team, it doesn't matter if it's the first quarter and it's a tie game, or if you're down 14-0, or if you're up 14-0. If he thinks he has the edge, he's going to go for the fakes.
Well, Ben, now that spring practice is over, we're getting ready for, fall camp. What position group or groups do you think is the most concerning heading into 2025?
I think they have a real opportunity to be a strength of this team, but it has to be the offensive line. And it has nothing to do with the athletes that are on the offensive line. It has everything to do with cleaning up the penalties. I go back to the Oregon State game every time I talk about this team. And it was early last season. We didn't really know what this Aztecs team was going to be yet. And it was 7-0 heading into the fourth quarter. And it felt like San Diego State had back-to-back drives that they were going to score on, and they had all the momentum behind them. And Marquez Cooper was wearing down the defense, and then it was holding calls within the red zone. And that really backed this team up all year. They would shoot themselves in the foot before they could get going. So if this offensive line group in 2025 can clean up the penalties, you're looking at turning 2 or 3 losses from last year into wins without those penalties. And how different is that looking at Sean Lewis's year one? If you just cleaned up the penalties, added 3 wins to this team, there would be much more excitement heading into this year. So if they can come out and for the first few games of the season, especially really have a focus on penalties and keeping the offensive line clean, that sets the momentum for the entire year.
Well, JR, in today's age of NIL, revenue sharing, and the transfer portal, how have you seen that change San Diego State's recruiting philosophy?
Oh man, I think even going back to when I played at San Diego State, we've always been I'll show you university. That's always been our locker room, right? You usually don't get a 5-star guy or a 4-star guy. You'll get a lot of 2-star, 3-star guys, even some guys that show up with no stars. And so we've always kind of had this really deep underdog mentality as players coming out of that locker room. I think what the transfer portal has done is it allows those guys who come to San Diego State as underdogs, play right away and play well, to get poached. It's an unfortunate situation where you can take a guy like a Jordan Napier, who's a great example. Comes into San Diego State, not a lot of hype, works his butt off, gets great coaching, explodes onto the scene as a redshirt freshman, 40 catches, 400 yards, and 4 touchdowns, and almost gets poached, right? Gets picked out of San Diego State into a different situation. Luckily, Jordan decided that the grass was not greener on the other side and left the transfer portal and came back to play for the Aztecs another year. But from a recruiting standpoint, I think what we're always going to get is we're always going to get guys who just want to be good at football. And we've seen this. The Denigal is a great example, right? Denigal, leaves California, goes to Michigan. I'm assuming the fanfare of being in the Big Ten and playing for the maize and blue and all that stuff coming out as a high school kid really excites you. But once you get there and you realize, man, I just want to be good at football. I want to go somewhere where I can play and be good at football. It feels like to me, whether the guys are coming out of high school or guys are transferring into San Diego State, as important as NIL is, I think kids still really want an opportunity to get to the National Football League. And you can only do that if you're on the field on Saturdays. Doesn't matter how much NIL bread they put in your bank account. You cannot make it to the NFL if you don't have snaps. And I feel like we'll always get kids who want to be good at football, whether coming out of high school or transferring. And I think that's the recruiting landscape that'll always remain the same. When you pull up to a San Diego State locker room, you're going to have a bunch of young men in that room that just want to be really good at football, and it doesn't matter how they got there.
Looking at, with revenue sharing and the collective, has San Diego State, we've seen some schools combine it, right? Like basically close down the collective and move everything in-house. What's going on out there at San Diego State with their collective?
Yeah, so, we run Aztec Link, been running it for a few years now, and really have run it as a support system to the university, just to kind of be there and to be a support system for the coaches, for the university, for the student athletes. We've been really proud of what we've been able to accomplish over the last couple of years through the collective. whether that was, retaining guys like Tano and Chris and Trey White, really being able to keep guys home, giving guys another year to develop in the system. The collective plays played a big role in that. And now we're just kind of at the service of the program. So we still do some things outside of rev share that we think are really, really, really important. A lot of times when you go to these bigger schools, you'll see that these schools have everything inside. They have the extra training. They have the big meal tables. They have the you don't have to want for anything system. San Diego State, that's not our story. So as a collective, we're still able to provide some of those extra benefits to the student athletes that rev share wouldn't be able to provide. So yeah, we're just here as a resource and as a resource for the fans, a resource for the student athletes, and really proud and excited the way this community has gotten behind Aztec Link and has helped us help the school build and build the best program that we could possibly build.
I feel like with college sports the way they are right now, you need guys like JR, and he won't brag about it, so I'll brag for him, but he doesn't take a salary to be part of Aztec Link. It is all legitimately what he just said. It's keeping guys home. You've heard him talk this entire time about local San Diego products and keeping them here, because we've seen the 5-stars go all over the country. Well, JR's mission, it feels like, is watch guys like Lucky Sutton grow up in San Diego, see them have crazy success in high school, and then keep them in San Diego. And I promise you, Tano Latuli, Trey White, they had offers to leave. And I think a big part of why they stayed is because they see alumni. They see JR come out there and say, hey, look, man, we're doing what we can for you. We want you to be part of San Diego. And it's a cool environment that he's built over at Aztec Link. And JR, I mean, thank you, man. You make my job easier watching this team.
I appreciate it.
Well, you kind of touched on it a little bit there, Ben, but how do you feel like the staff at San Diego State's doing navigating the portal?
So I think JD Wicker told you everything you need to know about how San Diego State feels with the transfer portal when they hired Sean Lewis, because you went and got a guy who was at Colorado, who had a front row seat to everything Dion was doing, and you brought him in, and we've seen the impact right away. I mean, there's a different buzz when you're at Snapdragon Stadium now. And I'm not saying it's better or worse. Obviously, guys who I was covering early, the Rocky Long and Brady Hoke, they had a ton of success running the programs they ran, but they didn't put Lamborghinis in the end zone. You know what I mean? So it's just different. And obviously the priorities for Sean are to make sure that San Diego State is competing in the NIL world and making sure social media is a priority, because you got to go to the fans where they are right now. And Sean Lewis has this incredible energy about him, where he wakes up and tweets every morning. It doesn't matter, but it's finishing with Aztec Fast. It's finishing with hashtag Be the Alpha. So Sean Lewis is making sure that he is getting the program out there as much as possible. And I think it's admirable. And it's something fresh and new that we haven't necessarily seen before.
JR, what do you think the main strength of this 2025 team is?
I mean, this is going to sound a little bit cliche, but I think we kept our foundation and our nucleus in the locker room. Tano, Trey, Gabe, Chris, Bryce, Jordan Napier, Ross Masuli, Christian, Joe. I mean, we have a very, very, very strong nucleus of guys who were here last year and played here last year and will play at a high level this year. I think that's the biggest strength of this football team, is the consistency that Coach Lewis and his staff has created with his core guys. I think that's probably really tough to do at the Power 4 level. Nonetheless, to do it at the Group of 5 level. But whatever Sean Lewis is selling, guys are buying. Whatever Sean Lewis is cooking, guys are eating. And hopefully that bodes well for this Aztec football program here in 2025.
Well, Ben, what does success look like for the Aztecs in 2025?
Better than last year. I think a lot of people were disappointed, myself and JR included. And when you look at how they started the year, it didn't quite make sense how they finished the year, because I mentioned that Oregon State game. They were in that game every second of it until the end. And I know it was a 21-0 score, but they were in that football game. Like, you know what a close football game looks like when you're watching it. And then they played Washington State, who ended up having a hell of a year and made a bowl game. And that ended up being a 3-point game shootout. Like, so that it felt like the team was scratching and they were close, but they didn't quite know how to win yet. So I'm looking at this year's team to see if they've taken that step forward. Like, do they know how to finish games? Do they know how to win? Do they know how to stay clean in terms of literally laundry on the turf? Like, can you keep the flags in the ref's pocket? And if they do all that, I can't imagine we're looking at a repeat of last year. I do think they're building in the right direction, but I'm not going to say you have to make a bowl game, because what does that even mean in college football anymore? It's like half the teams didn't have a team last year in the bowl games. So I'm not going to say that, but I'm saying look at improvement in year 2 of Sean Lewis and see if that Aztec fast system is really locking in. And if you can get to 8 or 9 wins this year, that's amazing. But if you get to 6 or 7 and you're seeing this team taking big steps forward, I'd love to see it. Finish in the top half of the Mountain West.
Well, JR, Ben just talked about, they don't know how to win yet. Looking at this 2025 schedule, is there a portion, is there a team, is there a stretch where you're like, this is what we are going to figure out the Aztecs are in 2025?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's those first 3 games of the season, right? Like, you open the season with Stony Brook and you got to take care of business there. But what I heard Ben say, and it kind of like it registered in my brain as I started reflecting back on the 2024 season, it did not feel like the team was getting better each week. And that's how I think this community is going to define success, right? Like, if you go out and you beat up on Stony Brook, okay, cool, great. But I think what this community needs to see, and what this football team is probably going to measure themselves against as well, is, can we get better in every phase of the game every single week? We've seen that a lot with San Diego State football teams. You get into that back half of the season, they're humming on all cylinders. We saw it with Rocky Long teams. We saw it with Brady Hoke teams. It felt like as the season went on, the team got better. It did not feel like that last year. It felt like as the season went on and we took a couple of tough losses, things did not continue to improve. And I think, I look at this and I say, from a production standpoint and from an improvement standpoint, offense, defense, and special teams needs to be miles ahead come October, where it was compared to August. So that's what I'm looking for this football team, is that 1% better attitude, that constant improvement in all 3 phases of the game.
Well, JR and Ben, we've covered a lot of ground today, but is there anything else you want to share or think that we should know about this 2025 San Diego State Aztecs football team?
Yeah, man, it feels like every time Jordan Napier was brought up, JR was the one talking about him. This dude's going to be ridiculous this year. Like, the amount of athleticism, he's the best athlete on the team. I'm pretty convinced. And maybe Tano, because he can golf or whatever, JR. But the way Jordan Napier runs is just different. And the way guys bounce off his body when he's running is different. Get ready for Jordan Napier to take over SportsCenter this year.
Yeah, I would say, listen, I don't think, I've always been taught that if you got 2 quarterbacks, you don't have a quarterback. I don't think that's the case this year. I think if Coach Lewis and his staff decide that Burt is going to be a huge part of that game plan along with Denigal, I think you're going to see something dynamic and something necessary. Again, when you have an athletic offense like San Diego State has, that's kind of a cold way of saying a lot of times we're going to be undersized, right? So if you can take your one position that can have the most impact on the game and create chaos by showing teams different looks with different players, I think it's really going to open up opportunities for this Aztec offense to get to where Coach Lewis is used to being, which is putting a lot of points on the board and picking up a lot of yardage along the way. So, that's one thing I would have the San Diego State football community to keep your eye on. If they decide to go a 2-quarterback system, it won't be a QB competition. It will be a very strategic, organized output, I believe, and I'm here for it. I think it'd be good for the program, good for the fans, and potentially really good for the scoreboard.
Drew Brees needed Taysom Hill for a little bit. You might get a little bit of that going on. And I don't think it's a bad thing either. And I think the way Burt moves, he's so fast, man. If he could get out into space, he'll make guys miss. And Jaden, while he has that Josh Allen look, he's not as much of a runner. I think he's classified as a dual threat quarterback, but they're looking for him to be a pocket quarterback who bombs the ball down the field. If Burt gives you that other look, and they are so different looking, one's up here, one's down here. So if you get that different look as quarterback, it's going to throw defenses into chaos. JR is spot on.
All right. Well, Ben, JR, we want to thank you for taking some time out of your day to spend with us and share your knowledge. We greatly appreciate it. But before we let you go, we want to give you guys an opportunity to share with our listeners where they can find you and maybe some things that you guys have working on or coming up.
At Fletch Sports, you see right there. That's everything. So Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, that's where I'm at. And then if you come to a San Diego State game this year, JR and I'll be the two idiots in the parking lot trying to steal people's food.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, same. You find me at JR Tolver on Twitter, JR Tolver16. I think it's JR Tolver on Instagram. And yeah, man, just really excited to be back in the parking lot with Ben. This is year 8, Ben, for me.
Something like that.
Started in 2017. So really cool to still be a part of the program, and want all the Aztec fans around the country to jump in and support. I think we're going to be pleasantly surprised in 2025 based off of what I've seen in the building this year.
Well, Ben and JR, thank you guys once again for joining us. We really appreciate it. And we're excited to see Sean Lewis and the Aztecs here in 2025. If you're watching us on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. If you're listening in podcast form, please rate and review on Amazon Music, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts. Thank you all for your support. And until the next time, we are the G5 Hive.